Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and today we are talking with Miss Ann Tomlinson. Ann spent over 20 years as the artistic director of the LA Children's Chorus, but I just crossed paths with Ann because of a new film that's coming out, Choir and Conductor. It's a film that documents the relationship between choir kiddos and their friends, choir kiddos and choir, and the beloved relationship between choir kiddos and their director. In this story, that was directed and produced by an LA superstar, Frida. She's amazing. I'll give you some of her quotes at the end. We follow Ann as she goes on her final tour in 2018 with the LA Children's Chorus. Throughout the film, I don't want to give it all away, you really get to know Ann. And so I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, I'd love to talk to you more. Before I write this film review, I'd love your take on this film, but also I just want to get to know you because by the end of the film, you can see that this is just Ann doing what she is so passionate about. Now, music friends, this episode is intentionally coming at the end of June. You know that I take a break from releasing new episodes throughout the month of July as a time to refresh and reset for the year ahead. This episode is so good and talks about her pathway into directing children's choirs. But through it, we talk about advocacy, we talk about collaboration, we talk about ideas to keep you motivated and driven, and y'all, so many good quotes. I am honored to call Ann Tomlinson one of my newest friends, and I can't wait for you to hear this discussion. You can find out more over at patreon.com/musicedmatters. You can reach out to me at emilybirch.org/contact. Of course, we have to thank our sponsors, the Kennison Choral Company and Kaleidoscope Adventures, for making all of these things possible, especially tours. And you'll hear a lot about tours in this episode. But enough housekeeping from me. Happy summer, and this is my friend, Ann Tomlinson, as we talk about her film, Choir and Conductor, and the life that led her there. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are talking to a legend and the most wonderful Miss Ann Tomlinson. Hello, Ann.
Hi, Emily. Good to see you.
I'm really excited that you agreed to come on the podcast. We don't know each other, but I feel like I know you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Anything I can do to support choir directors, it's just the most wonderful thing. Great.
We do have the coolest career. I do like about the podcast platform that it's flexible enough to do quick conversations like this one we're having, which, y'all, I found out about Ann Tomlinson because I'm reviewing a film called Choir and Conductor, and we'll get into that in a second. But as soon as I watched the film, I reached out and I really need to talk to Ann. I feel like I need to have her on the podcast to capture these stories because, Ann, you laid the groundwork for so many people to come in and be able to be a part of this children's choir movement. You were part of that initial boom. Can you tell us how you got into choir directing and what life was like in the early days of youth choirs?
Sure, I'd love to. My great mentor was Jean Ashworth Bartle, who led the Toronto Children's Chorus. But I was a keyboard major and I took a conducting class just because I thought, well, as an organist choir master, I better learn that choir master part along with the keyboard. And so I took a conducting class from Daniel Moe at Oberlin Conservatory, go Obies. And I just fell in love with it. So I did my master's at Northwestern in conducting with Margaret Hillis when she was there, one of the few women to lead any choral department in the nation at that time, and learned so much from her. But I was an organist choir master in the Chicago area and then moved to Colorado and moved out here to Southern California. Met Rebecca Thompson, who had founded the LA Children's Chorus just 6 or 7 years before. And then she and her husband moved and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, would you be willing to be the artistic director of the Los Angeles Children's Chorus? And I remember thinking, oh gosh, will I be any good at that? I did the junior choir, but But it all worked out. I took the leap, and I love it. It's such an important endeavor for children and for our country too.
I love it. And the sound, when y'all watch this movie, Choir Conductor, you are just blown off your sofa in the first couple minutes of the gorgeous sound coming out of this ensemble. I have a couple questions. So from Chicago to Colorado, what were you moving for? Were you moving for jobs or for family or?
That was for a job. It was the organist choir master position in a town just north of Denver, Fort Collins. And I met my beloved there who was moving to California. And so I followed the move to California was for love.
Okay.
And then the LA Children's Course was just like a total surprise. I hadn't taken one music education course. I'd always studied keyboard or conducting. So it was just such a wonderful surprise to see these young children so eager to learn. And my goodness, they taught me everything I needed, that's for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you started with the junior choir over there. When you moved to California, did you just jump in and like, hello, I'm here. I'd like to do something. How did you get started with them?
Well, Rebecca Thompson, who was with the LA Children's Chorus, had was doing a workshop and asked for a pianist. And I offered to do that, and I thought, well, I looked through the repertoire. It was mostly at that time very straightforward repertoire, 4/4 G major, quarter eighth, and but I read through it so I'd be prepared. And then I went to the workshop with her, and she is such an interpretive genius. She gets the most out of every note, out of every word. And I was just taken. I couldn't keep my eyes off her, and just thought, wow, I have so much to learn. So she called me and she said, the LA Children's Chorus is looking for an accompanist. Would you come up and audition? And I said, sure, I'd love to. And she goes, okay, I'll send you the music in a day or two, and can you come up Saturday? That was like 4 days away. So I didn't get the music, and I didn't get the music. And so I called the office and I said, I'm really waiting. Could you send that along really quickly, or can I come by and pick it up? And they said, oh no, Rebecca's decided she'd like you to sight read the audition. I went, okay, that adds a certain level of excitement. and I said, and what will the repertoire be? And she said, oh, well, we're preparing for the LA Philharmonic Mahler's Third Symphony. So you'll be sight reading Mahler 3.
Nightmare. That's a nightmare.
And I didn't have a score. There wasn't a music store nearby, sadly. So I quick ran and got a recording and tried to listen and figure out some of the key relationships. And so I came up and auditioned on Mahler 3, and I didn't think I'd done that well, but she saw potential, thank goodness. So I started with them as a keyboard accompanist. And then as the choir grew and grew under her leadership, they asked if I would lead the entry-level choir. And then when she moved, I was honored to take the artistic director position.
Wow, what a great story. Okay, life lesson number 1, volunteer when asked. You started by just volunteering for a workshop.
Right. And I always tell our graduating students, doors will open. You never know when, you never know where, but try to be as prepared as you can be so that when that door opens, you can recognize it and you can be ready to make it your moment.
I love that's a quotable moment. Doors will open, be ready. I love it. Okay, so you volunteered, you jumped in and read Mahler 3 sight reading. How did you learn how to work with children?
It really was sitting at the feet of Rebecca, and then Stephanie Maury was also the intermediate choir director at that time. And here were 2 early pioneers of the movement who were working. They brought in artists and choirs from around the world to work with the children. I did a lot of listening to different recordings. The resource was somewhat limited. Doreen Rao was doing her work and had summer workshops, so I availed myself of every opportunity I could to learn and to grow. And then, of course, the children are great teachers too. I mean, you see the minute they get bored and their eyes wander off, or you've said something that just kind of like, whoops, didn't quite sink in. And so if you're attentive enough to them, I think they're a great teacher for us as well.
I love that. That's a great one too, to be attentive to the students and the singers, and they'll teach you just as much as watching. But you did a lot of listening. And what I love in this film is you can see that attentive relationship that you built with the singers over time. So, can you talk to us a little bit for those people that are out there in their early, middle, or late career? What was it like as you put in the time at the LA Children's Chorus, and when did you start noticing, because they were there to make sure your retirement choir tour was one for the books. Those kids loved you. How did you build that? And what pieces of advice could you give someone listening that's about to start their career or mid career? What are some things that you realized looking back?
Um, each child is so interesting and remarkable. So I tried as hard as I could to get to know the children. You know, that before rehearsal moment is critically important. And I think early in my career, I was so nervous about being ready for rehearsal. I was putting up, and preparing all my materials. But then I realized, wait a minute, I can only really help the children if I get to know them better. And so I spent time before rehearsal, during rehearsal breaks, whenever I could, to have conversations with them. And I tried to keep in touch with them visually, all throughout rehearsal, and just make those human connections so that the pathway of communication can be open. And I think it's so important to believe in them. They have so much potential. And I think they see that when an adult goes, maybe this is hard today, but I bet at next rehearsal we'll get it. And I think believing in them, trusting that they can do it is really vital to building a relationship too.
I love how in the movie it captures a lot of scenes from choir tour. And choir
Mhm.
tours in and of themselves are monumental. But one of my favorite scenes is where the kids keep singing. And you come on at one point with a little spot, a little cameo, and you say it's not the easy songs that they break out into on choir tour. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, one of the fun things is, I'm sure all your choirs do this too, just spontaneously. They'll be walking down a street, or they'll be in some, maybe museum or something, and oh, let's sing, let's sing. And, so many people might assume that they would pick the most rhythmically intense one, or the one with a sweet, easy melody, but they didn't. They gravitated towards the texts that were challenging, and the pieces that had the most intricate harmonies. And I always felt so assured by what I was hoping to share with them, that they would really want to revel in the beauty of some of the most difficult challenges that they had faced. Probably a lot of it is the pride they took in accomplishing the ability to master that piece.
There is so much pride in those kids' faces throughout the entire film. And I know this is just a little snippet of the end of your career with LACC, but what was so cool as an outsider watching the film, there's this one scene, I don't want to give too much away, but there's this one scene where they bump into another American choir. And this American choir is a very typical a cappella choir. And so they sang a couple pop song mashups. And then your kids broke out into some of the most stunning sounding choral music. And the a cappella group was just jaw on the ground, not what they were expecting at all. And your kids broke, I don't even know what piece it was now that I watched it a couple weeks ago. Do you happen to remember?
I'm thinking it might have been, is it Even When He Is Silent?
Yes.
Yeah, piece. And because we were going to Norway, of course, that's
Mhm.
and and it was wonderful to sing many of his pieces. And the
Oh,
kids
it
just
was
love his harmonic language.
It was so pretty. And they were a cappella in the middle of a square, and they break out into this gorgeous, clear, like really confident sound. And the a cappella group is like, whoa, I didn't even know that was possible. It was so
But
cool.
there's no second alto with them in that group, in
Oh,
that small group. And I'm going, oh, there's
don't
for
worry.
those of
No
you who
one
know that
noticed.
piece, please, we did sing the second alto part. It just, there wasn't a singer in that group that day.
Those are the things that only you would know. And I was so
Oh,
mesmerized by how the movie captured that relationship between singers and the choir and the conductor, the singers and the conductor. And as an advocacy and collaboration person, as the chair of that committee, this film really is an excellent piece of advocacy.
it, children can accomplish so much. And it's so important to sing together, no matter whether you're children or adult. I mean, we all know this, but you all have met the challenges during COVID, and I'm so grateful for all of you and your endeavors to keep people singing through this time. But we must band together and keep sharing the importance of building a community of mutual trust, intense listening, sharing equally, responsibility to one another. With our society seemingly pulling apart at the seams, I think choral art will save the world. And thank you all for all your great work.
I love it. But you set the path for that. I hope you realize that you and your generation paved the way. I talk to Barbara Tagg often. She's a dear friend.
Oh,
And she tells the story of how when she first started advocating for her program, y'all had to go out and define what is a children's choir.
right, right. And Barbara, again, very early pioneer in the movement. We had to be almost more well, we were fortunate to have professional opportunities, but we had to prove ourselves as more disciplined, more ready, more beautiful than, because, people at that time heard children and immediately sort of went to a very different place as to what they could accomplish. And so the challenge was not to be bold about our abilities while remaining humble about the opportunities that we deserve to. So
That's a good life lesson, though, right there in itself. I just know that I'm so thankful for the path that's been laid before so that my generation can come in, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But what you said, choral music can save the world. And I think I'd like to ask some questions specifically for this film review, if you don't mind. So I reached out to Frida. What was her role in the film?
So Frida is the director. Frida is this amazing documentary filmmaker who, some filmmakers in documentaries have a story they want to tell, but Frida tells other people's stories. And when she first came to us, because this is one of the series of films she made on the choir, the very first time she said, please don't introduce me to the children. I want to just disappear because I want to tell your story. I want this to be as natural as possible. And of course, there's this large camera and people in the back of the room. So I said, well, I'm going to need to at least explain to them what's going on. But Frida is a gifted person who just gets right to the essence. And I'm very close to this film, so it's hard to judge it. But I think she's done a great job at capturing who the LA Children's Chorus is, as well as the importance of choral singing in our culture.
I love that part too, because I feel like I now know about you. I know about your choir, which I already knew existed, but to see those behind the scenes interactions and those conversations and the rehearsals and the tour, it made it so real.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, she was present all the way along and somehow kind of makes herself invisible. So she doesn't alter what's happening. She just captures it beautifully.
Well, I asked her a couple questions too, and those were exactly her words. It wasn't my story to tell. She was very intrigued by you and your work and the way the children sounded, and she wanted to capture that. I think she said the first film she did with y'all was called Sing. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yes.
When was that one?
That was, oh my goodness, when I first began, so 20 some years ago. And we were very thrilled. We didn't know Frida before a friend of ours called and said, you need to document what you're doing and I'll help you with it. And here's this great director. And then it was nominated for an Academy Award. We were just speechless. So we were honored. And then Frida was so intrigued, she decided to capture our trip to China. So there's a Sing China. There's also a film about we had a commissioned and premiered an opera that we staged, which was a huge project.
Wow.
And then this is sort of the bookend of our experience with a trip to Norway and to Iceland.
It was beautifully done, and you could tell that whoever made the film, it opens with, I don't want to give it all away, but it opens with Billie Eilish. Like, come on. I get cool points just showing that.
I I know. I finally have cred with my grandchildren.
How did that happen?
Well, Billie was in the choir. Billie came to us. She has a beautiful voice. She could sing so high, and her legato, which early in her career, I think is one of the things that kind of set her apart. She learned with us in the gentle sort of bel canto production that we have, rather that we teach rather than the pot belt. And she's to this day supports the choir. She's given so much of her time as well as some of her we always auction off Billie's latest ukulele or whatever. She's was in the choir, and until she became so famous, she just didn't have time anymore. But she was actually very quiet. She wasn't, one of the girls who walked into the room and took the room. She just was very quiet, but she was very charismatic. She always had kids around her.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Do you remember your first time having her in choir?
I did, because back then she had bleached her hair almost, white. And so, of course, even though she wasn't, the loudest person in the room, she did have a way of attracting attention. And she sat there. She was a first soprano because she could just sing high so beautifully. And she read music well. So I put her next to a couple of singers that needed that support. She was just the model chorister. She was always dedicated, on time, attended all the rehearsals. So
you never know who's going to be
fun
in
to
your
see
choir.
her success.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I just was running to one of her songs this morning, ironically. But what was so neat is it starts with that. And so I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't read anything about the film before watching it. I wanted no biases. And it opens with Billie Eilish. I'm like, let's go. And
Bit of a surprise.
it was. And it was all about be in choir. She literally is a big poster child of be in choir.
Yeah, she is. Talk about an advocate. We should talk about that. We could maybe see what she could do. But to this day, one of her closest friends was a friend she met in the children's chorus. So I think it just, for all of us, we know this, it builds lifelong friendships.
I wholeheartedly see and feel that center feel, like that heartbeat in this film. So as I'm writing the film, I have kind of the draft of the review is written, and it talks about when the film was made, who made it, why it was made. It introduces y'all, talks about why to watch it. But if you were writing the review, what would you say about the film, and why would someone want to watch it?
What a great question. I would say the film captures the importance of people working together to create something beautiful, something that they couldn't create by themselves, and something that creates a situation where we rely on one another, and it tells the fun story of crazy choir people. I mean, we're kind of like a niche, right?
Right.
we're what is it that one of the kids says? We're sort of a species. So she gets it right.
I think that's so well said. I write in the review, if you're a choir person, watch this because it helps you reconnect to that why. I've seen a lot of teachers at the end of the year quit telling me to find my why and start telling me why not leave. And I think a movie like this, the sound, the experience of the kids, that really connected to my heartstrings and reminded me why I'm here. And that was important. So if you're a choir person, I feel watch it for that. But show it to your boards. I mean, we're trying to get our board to get on board, literally, with going overseas. And this is the type of experience that will show them. And you talk about it too. Do you remember your first tour versus your last tour?
That was the last tour. We had we toured with a choir every year. And on odd number of years, we were touring in the US because being off on the West Coast, not everybody got to hear us. And then on even number of years, we traveled internationally. And for those international tours, we tried to alternate between a sort of expected destination, England, Italy, Germany, and then something a little bit more exotic, a little off the grid. So we went to Brazil, we went to China, we went to South Africa. And again, all this to to expand young people's understanding of the world and their ability to relate to people from different cultures. And I just think international and national travel are just so important for building global understanding and unity.
Oh, I love that. Building global understanding and unity. Write that down for your bullet points of how to advocate for your next tour. That's incredible. Did the whole choir go on tour?
That was the amazing thing. Yeah. Many of the children had resource that they could afford the tour, but we have a wonderful patron who herself believed in the importance of international experiences for young people, as well as she herself grew up without much and got a scholarship, so she supports scholarships. So any child who could not afford to go was scholarshiped so that international tours were possible.
Wow.
For the whole choir. And then musically, not only for international understanding, but if you're trying to sell this to your board, we left with a choir that sounded fine, but by the time we got back from tour, they sounded spectacular. Mm-hmm. So the choir we left with just grew, and it just enhances the artistry and the educational level of the course in multiple ways, tenfold.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the thing that you don't realize until it happens and you come back and they hear the difference. Mm-hmm. The relationships change, everything.
Yeah. Children know one another, but sometimes the kids go, oh, so many rehearsals, so many practices. And then when we have an alumni meeting, the very first thing they all say is, what were some of your favorite memories? It's always the touring, always. Mm-hmm. That's what really has impacted them.
Yeah, choir species. They love to go on choir tour. I love that. Okay, so you saw the difference in your singers, their travel and their experiences over life. You made this friendship with the producer, Frida, director, right?
Right.
I get all that confused.
All that, yeah.
So over your tenure at LACC, what's your most memorable performance and what was your most intimidating performance?
Oh goodness, probably the most intimidating might have been my first, just because although I studied with Margaret Hillis and she graciously allowed us to attend Chicago Symphony Orchestra rehearsals and performances. I really wasn't sure I had the chutzpah nor the skill to, prepare Mahler 3 for Esa-Pekka Salonen, to prepare operas for Maestro Conlon and Domingo and Maestro Dudamel. So my first actually was Mahler 3. And that's a tricky one because the kids have to begin their movement with no introduction. They have to get their pitch off like a triple low B flat from the double basses, the movement before, and then they have to come up with a tritone about 5 octaves higher. Fortunately, they did it. Yay. And I think for me, there's so many, it's so hard to pick, but probably Mahler 8. I had the great good fortune of doing 2 Mahler 8 performances, which is one of my all-time most important and inspiring pieces. But then, and one of the Mahler 8s was with Dudamel bringing his orchestra from Venezuela with the LA Philharmonic and 1,000 singers from LA. Talk about a powerful community created of an international community. So that was wonderful. But, and then I also remember going to this wonderful nursing home in Alaska where the people just wouldn't let us go. Oh, please sing us just one more song. So, there were some pretty stellar ones, but yet for the human connection that's created, those sweet local ones are just as stunning and life-giving.
Oh, I love it. What cool memories and what exciting things that we get to just kind of live vicariously through your experience. Did you know you wanted to do all those big productions? Did you know this was something that the choir would do, or were you how did you get into all of that?
Well, fortunately, Rebecca Thompson, the founding director of LACC, had built relationships with the Philharmonic and with the opera. So when I took over, it was just a matter of like, can I get myself up to speed to prepare these children to be successful in these environments? And then it just grew. LA as a city kind of grew up. It was a little bit of a raw environment, especially coming from Chicago, which is such a tradition of deep musical excellence and so many arts presenters. But we just formed partnerships as the community grew with the contemporary work that's going on here with the Jacaranda music series, with other choruses that were just adult choruses burgeoning in this area, the Angelus Chorale. And of course, we had a wonderful working relationship with the LA Master Chorale, the Hollywood Bowl. So it was an embarrassment of riches in the city that was available to the children. They worked very hard to be successful and understand what it would take to be successful in a professional environment. But it just grew and expanded. It was such a fun to be a part of that too.
But you can tell that collaboration's in your DNA, both as an organization and you personally.
Well, that's what it's about, right? Connecting to people and finding pathways to understanding. It's nothing better than using, or not using, but having a chorus there to enhance that experience.
Yeah, that choir. It's not using, but you're using choir to make the connection, which I think is, I say that all the time. Choir brings us together, but it's all the things that happen in between the singing that keep us so tight and locked in.
Very true, very true.
So let's think about someone listening that is looking to start a collaboration. Do you have any tips as someone who came in and had to foster collaborations that already existed, but also start new ones?
Sure. I think recognizing what your children can be successful at, and what you have to offer, and then share that. Go to local other conductors of adult choruses, and of course you want to do Carmina Burana with a 2 piano version. And we're just the perfect person to do those ho's, and besides, your audience will expand because not only do you have that children's choir, but you have all the moms and dads and aunts and uncles and neighbors that are going to come and support. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you to expand your audience. And then, of course, the collaborative effort of getting more musicians to know each other across your city. It's just tremendously important. Or go to the band director. I'm sure there's some, I didn't work with bands that much, but there must be some wonderful pieces. And don't be shy about saying, this is important. We need to do it. As educators, we need to give our children this experience to work with instruments, to work with adult voices. It's just a part of their educational mandate that would inspire us all to get together and make music education, as it is so much for Maestro Dudamel, just part of what every adult organization should be continuing.
I love that. It's just part of what it should be. So let's make it happen.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we've talked about the film. We've talked about your career. We've identified ways to advocate and to collaborate. Let's wrap it up with my favorite question. It's the Music Ed Matters podcast. What's the one thing that really matters that you want the listener to remember from this conversation?
I would say believe in the power of yourself, of your own voice, and believe in the power of the people that you have the wonderful good fortune of working with to create something that is so unique and special. And it's something that the world needs to hear. So go for it. You're all wonderful, and the world needs you.
This is so great. And it's been a joy to get to know you. Thank you for spending time together.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Emily. All best to you in all that you do, and thank you for your support of choral artists.
Okay, who's excited to go build community this fall? Anybody? Totally me. I have so many great quotes from Anne. I want to know what you thought. What was your favorite part? What did you learn from this? Are you excited to watch her film, Conductor and Choir, Choir and Conductor? I get it always backwards. But it is such, like you said, a mutual relationship back and forth. It's that connection of people. It's getting connected to the human. I love what she said, too, about how to get started with collaboration. Anyway, tell me what you're thinking. It's always a joy to hear what you think. It was so much fun to sit down with Anne, and it just reminds me how thankful I am for this podcast and for you, for giving us opportunities like this to have conversations. You know, you, my friend, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially this new film and the life and the work of our friend Anne Tomlinson. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.